listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. This week, the party put aside their differences, stopped the backstabbing and the infighting, and start to talk about goals. Player goals, character goals, table goals, and party goals. Let's see if they can put together a plan so that everybody can get what they want.
Welcome to the party. I'm Shane.
I'm Eoin.
I'm Colin.
And I'm still Savage.
We cannot overturn the status quo. It is eternal.
It's the way I was built, and god damn it, I'm not being rebuilt. Okay.
We have to set ourselves a quest. We must rebuild Savage. There must be something that must be done. That's going to be the rest of the campaign, I think.
Better, faster, stronger, less rural.
Something like that. But yes, we are here to talk about goals in your RPG. Why you should probably have them, why you probably have them and don't realise, and who sets goals? Who sets boundaries? Who sets the time?
Who goals the goalie?
So, we'll start off with some brief thoughts on goals and their place in RPGs.
Well, I do have a brief thought. I've got two components I've created a short-term goal for myself tonight. I've got two components here in front of me. One is a pint glass emblazoned with the Leprechaun logo, which I got at a convention called Leprechaun. The other is a can of 8 Degrees Brewing Full Irish Single Malt IPA, and I'm going to open them now. The reason I'm going to open them is because one of our listeners, Jason, requested more drinking sounds, specifically ice clinking, but I figure can opening and a bit of foam, whoops.
I do have some rum,
it's good enough.
But I don't have any ice.
I was sure he had secretly signed up to some sort of sponsorship deal the way he delivered that line.
I listen to podcasts. I'm just going to pour it out here now. Jason, if you're listening, Jason is host of pull up the tab. The Nerds RPG Variety Cast, which you can find on Anchor and Spotify. If you drop by our Discord, you'll find some links to his show. Jason's been with us for a while now in the Discord. He's been an awesome party goer, and I'm just reaching out, Jason, saying, "This pint's for you, bud." So, with my goals achieved, I'll hand back to. We're not finished. I'll hand back to you, Shane.
Okay. Well, I wanted to go last because I have a really obnoxious, pretentious thesis statement of the nature of goals in RPGs, but does anyone else want to stop?
Eoin?
What do I think about goals in RPGs?
Yeah.
Be very cautious about introducing beginners to them.
Okay.
I'll put it like that. They often have analysis paralysis. You're often better giving them a goal and letting them come up with their own second goal. The first goal is too tough sometimes for them to figure out. They'll often pick something that will take them hundreds of sessions to accomplish, and they leave themselves feeling unfulfilled because everyone else is fulfilling their goals. This is particularly true of games in which advancement is tied to the completion of goals, of which there are several. So you're best off giving, here is a starting goal, or here are a choice of 3 starting goals, pick one of these, and when you're done, you get another one. So something like that.
Yeah.
You need to make them more accessible to people.
Mr. E, how do you like to set down the jumpers?
I would definitely start by drawing the distinction between goals for players and goals for characters, as they're going to be wildly different things unless you guys are, I don't know, there's probably crimes being committed if both are the same. I think players having goals, that's right back to the classic. Everybody needs to sit down and talk about what they want out of the game discussion. But, it's a thing. It's important. The goals for your characters can be wild and varied and involve explosions if you want. But I think they matter. They're important because they help the players stay engaged. They provide some drive and some impetus to a game. So figure something out. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be important. But you need something to keep them ticking over.
Yeah, I agree. There's some things that, as a player, you just want to see happen. maybe even your player goal is to get good at playing a particular class, which is something I've certainly set out to do in games in the past. I've picked something that was kind of beyond my experience level and thought, right, I'm going to try this class and see if I can get good at it, and or at least figure out what people like about it. Shane, are you ready to drop one of the pearls of wisdom on us yet, or will I keep going?
Okay, no, I'm happy to interrupt you at this point. So the way I'm thinking about it is, even if you don't think you have a goal, you probably do have a subconscious goal. And if you aren't aware of it, it can lead to your character doing very odd things in the surface of a goal that you set without realizing it. This is my logic here. So we can assume that if you sit down at a table to play an RPG, you want to play that game, right? I think that's 90% of the people sit down RPG. They want to play that RPG. We can assume that, right?
They're not being forced.
You have a different problem if they don't want to play the RPG.
Yeah.
We're back to the thing with
problem.
the crimes.
Yeah.
It takes an awful lot of care and feeding to keep hostages for any length of time.
Yeah. Second thing, I don't think it's tremendously controversial to see that the best connection between player and character will generally happen when they have similar goals, or one side's goal is to achieve the other side's goal. I don't think that's a controversial statement. The idea that you make the character to do the thing that you want to do, or you have set the goal of see if you can get your character to the point you want them. I think these two can combine together, and that if you don't have set yourself a character goal, your character's goal will be to make the game happen, whether you realize it or not. And you will end up with a character whose sole dedication is to make sure that the party is never tied down, the party is always doing something interesting, and the party is always aimed like a ballistic missile at the nearest point of content and yucks. I think murder, hope, or behavior is sort of it can be diagnosed as an attempt to proliferate the game, not prolong it so much as cause game to happen. The idea is that if you don't have keep some awareness of your goals, that doesn't mean you're not going to have a goal. It means that the goal is going to happen, and you could end up finding yourself defending behavior that you don't know why you wanted to do, is a thing. So setting the goals is less about passing your exam as it is making sure you don't drive onto the sidewalk. But again, this is my pretentious nonsense, so maybe we can...
I feel like there's a Freudian construct about to boil up out of this.
Yeah, something Jungian.
An ego and superego in conflict within the mind of the player and the mind of the character. That's not entirely mad.
Yeah.
The idea that a character is in some sense being driven to things that are against their own interests, or perhaps run counter to their deeply held beliefs because the player needs the game to happen. And I will now jump out of the pop psychology bucket and into Owen's lap. Owen, what do you think of all that?
Players will drive their characters to do things that the characters would never do. That's pretty common. When was the last time you remember a character going, or a player going, you know what, my character's super tired, he should stop doing this stuff? Who have ever seen like actual levels of human willpower will be employed here? Wow, I am too tired to do this, so I'm just going to leave now. I cannot deal with this person's stuff, I've
seen other examples of it, like people asking sort of leading questions of, my character is over at the other side of the room. They didn't see this fight start. Is it possible that I failed my perception check and didn't notice it? Or something similar like that, leading questions as if to imply that they're sort of looking for excuse to be ignorant, so that they can do something funny rather than take part in the game. Has anyone ever seen that sort of?
Oh yeah, like there's tons of, there's no end of malfeasance and dirty pool that will be employed.
To answer your question, Owen, and to sort of hang you by your own petard, I've witnessed you do something that I thought was incredibly interesting along those lines. You had a character who, in the middle of a sort of one of these adventures, went, "I've got to go to work. I've got a job, and I need to do it. So I'll be elsewhere."
Yes.
I remember just sitting there going, "Damn, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's okay. This massively inconveniences us.
That's important, and that's
interesting.
That's really good though, because that is.
Oh yeah.
But that is considering your character's actual goals. If you're not a professional superhero, or whatever it is you're playing, and you realize, okay, sure, this, obstructing the bad guy's plans, that's really important. But if I don't get in for my shift, then I'm going to lose that job. And if I lose that job, then, I can't pay for my rent, and then I'm homeless. And how good am I going to be at saving the world if I'm homeless? It's
We've all seen Hancock.
No
one saw Hancock.
Like this is it's a great example of a player accounting for his character's goals, which aren't always necessarily, everybody has to prioritize goals, and prioritizing, my personal well-being and my job and my career and so on. That's really important to me right now. Yes, this sort of GM-inspired plot hook, I get it. That's important, but I definitely got to do the other thing first. I like it.
Yeah, I have to say, and I quite liked how utterly mundane it was. Like there's lots of things on the line, but you got to eat, you got to keep your job, and that's a commitment you made as well. Show up and do your work.
But a lot of people would be reluctant to do that because they don't want Jimmy the other end of the table scowling at them for role playing their character instead of helping out in the big 15 miniatures fight that he has been pushing the game for.
It's HidaOwin. He cares not for your pettiness.
True, I often don't. But it is not it's never an excuse.
No, I thought
to
it was
play a jerk.
Character.
But it's never an excuse to play a jerk. If you ever find yourself being more of a hindrance than help, your character being more of a hindrance than help, that's a lot to do with the player.
I think that sits in a very different camp from what we're talking about here.
Does.
Like that was a very grounded, character-based, goal-focused decision, and I kind of wish there was more of it. Personally, I'll sit there in session 0 and I'll sort of dream about an A to B that I'd like to explore, and sometimes it's not really something that's going to shake the foundation of the world, but it might be recover from trauma, learn to love again, or put a business back together. And I often have a great deal of fun by pursuing those character goals, because as a player I find it interesting to have that texture to the story and to be able to turn to other players, or other characters in the game and sort of interact with them in a way that forwards that.
My point wasn't that the setting of goals will automatically disrupt everyone else's fun. It's that people are often reluctant to set goals because they imagine that they're in a group activity and thus must, go to the common denominator of the group, which is usually terrible combat and over-the-top role-playing.
Understood.
We had an interesting one, actually, to turn it back on you again, Mick, is that when you came in once playing a character who'd suffered a lot of trauma, and you were very effective in emphasizing that, so much so that I turned to the GM and said, I'm not sure we should bring this person with us. He seems really traumatized, and this is a high-pressure situation. I'm worried he's going to freak out, get himself killed, or us killed, or all of us killed. Is there anything I could do to help him? And Gray's like, well, we shouldn't really resolve his trauma that quickly. And I'm like, that's perfectly acceptable. However, I'm still really worried because I think this guy is, very close to be sitting in the office, cleaning his rifle, telling me Full Metal Jacket,
So that's a great point, because there was a twofold purpose there. One was to do the A to B story of the character. My purpose as a player on that occasion, because this ended up with a full-on throwdown fight between myself and another player, in the first session where these two characters interacted, because I'd built a combat melee monster and I really wanted to test those rules and see how well he would do. And I more or less kind of discussed it with the other guy, and we said, "Oh, let's go for it." And we played it out, and I found out that, yeah, I'll be fine if I don't take on this particular class of character. I was put in an infirmary, but it helps to set up all of this stuff. So I had a very short term player goal: find out how good this guy is in combat against credible opposition, and it set up the longer term goal: move closer to not being quite so crazy and traumatized, and become a more effective team member as we go on. And I think that's the character I would most often think of when we talk about this kind of thing as a success story in terms of achieving those long and short term goals.
You also had an interesting point, Shane, about player goals versus character goals, and you made the joke about someone not wanting to be there. The dark secret of every RPG is if you hang out on the right message boards, someone will sidle up to them and say, "I'm playing X game. I don't want to play X game. How do I ruin X game so we can play Y game instead?" And it comes up a bit like someone coming in and says, "What is the right way to ruin a wedding?" Because I really...
You know what? I've seen those threads. I've seen those questions being asked. It's bizarre that people will... And that's as blatant as they will ask them. It's like, I want to disrupt and derail this entire game so that I can play the game I want to play. Wow.
That's I feel we're going right to adult conversation there. And unfortunately, the internet is not a good place to get an adult conversation.
I've got a great example of that where I have a friend of mine who was really big into playing L5 War, the CCG, and the local shop was really heavy into Magic. Super heavy into Magic. So he went, "Okay, what can I do about this? I could try and recruit everyone, but that's really difficult because everyone's like, well, we already play Magic." He said, "I've got a far better way of doing this." He went on the internet and he built himself an affinity deck. He bought an affinity deck. He came in and he ruined Friday Night Magic for a month until everyone gave up. Said this format is terminally broken.
Wow.
And they all played L4 instead.
And at that point he went, "So guys, have you heard of this L5R game?"
That was pretty much what he did, and then he had 20 people in the shop playing L4. You gotta do what you gotta do sometimes, you know?
Apparently. Okay, so goals, obviously, players pick a lot of goals themselves. How important is it for the GM to set goals?
The GM should give guidance to the players. If the players, the players will often be looking for stuff to do. The GM is up to the GM to give a hint, but also to present choices. Like, you can say, if you're playing a pre-published campaign, often the choice is, guys, you're doing it or you're not doing it. And really, I've spent all this money and spent all this time, so we're bloody doing it, okay? You know, you can argue with me later. If you don't want me to run the game, that's fine. Someone else can run the game, but we're doing my plot. Yeah. And it's kind of up to you in that situation to find a goal that works with that plot as a good player. That's the little bit of player buy-in. You shouldn't decide, where are we? We're in the Empire. Cool. My goal is to go to Lustria. And the GM is like, lads, that ain't happening in the next 4 years. And you're like, still, I'm going to Lustria, and everything is going to be about going to Lustria until we get to Lustria. And you could do that, but it's not a very good player. You should work with the GM to come up with an idea. I want to do this. And that's often great for the GM. The GM's like, awesome, I can do that. I can throw that stuff in. I want to fight a duel with a guy and take his rapier. That I can do. I want to fight a duel with a guy and get his pistol. That I can do. You know?
Yeah, it's the goal set by GM thing. I think it's a slider. You know, you've got a scale, you've got levels of it you need to apply, and I think for the most part, the default position, I think, is the GM needs to be doing quite a lot of that. And the kind of fundamental of that is the GM is the one who is establishing the overall plot for your game. Mm-hmm. So if the GM, now whether it's coming out of a pre-published adventure or the dark and murky recesses of a GM's hindbrain, it's still coming from the GM to the players. Here's your plot. Players can, they're notorious for letting plot bricks bounce off their skulls and swallowing plot hooks whole and letting it just pass through their system entirely undigested. They do very strange things to the plot. But the GM's role, primarily at a table, like the GM has two roles. He has to provide the plot, and he has to resolve the acts of resolution as people try and work their way through the plot. That's what a GM is there for. Different games, though, are going to have different levels of that. If you're running the pre-published book of stuff, it's like, we are going to, chapter 1, it's all about you go into here and you beat up some kobolds and rescue the missing dog, and then you find the clue to the next bit, which is going to take you up the mountain, and so on. It's pretty tight. You've got to feed those goals to your players, and the players have to appreciate that, if you don't rescue the dog and find the note that sends you up the mountain, then this is going nowhere, as Eoin said. But there are other types of games where you can play in a kind of a much more sandboxy environment and give the players a lot of freedom. And I've run those kind of games, and they can work really, really well. But as a GM, you need to be ready with some goals. You need to be ready to step in for that moment when your players are either a little bit lost or are perhaps in too secure a position.
Mm.
And
Scarr, go ahead.
There's a kind of bit of writing advice of, if you're stuck as to what's going to happen in the next chapter of your novel is, kill someone.
Yeah.
Orcs come through the door with AK-47s.
Exactly. Like, if you are letting your players play in their sandbox environment and things are going well for them, blow up a house, burn down their stuff, murder one of their servants, do something nasty to them, and suddenly they will find a goal. They will, vengeance is a goal. So
I would definitely never recommend a new BGM to start with the sandbox. I would always be like, start with a pre-published adventure. The arc of your GMing career is probably going to go as follows. You start with a pre-published adventure, you go, this is too restrictive, I'm running a total sandbox. And then as you get older, you're like, I'm too tired to write all this, I'm just going to run some cool pre-published adventures with all the techniques I learned while running the sandbox. I don't have the time to write all this crap, think of people's names, write up locations. I'm just going to use all this fine stuff they typed out for me already, and I'm going to just run that. And I'm going to use all the improvisational tricks and goals that I learned playing the sandbox or playing the more freeform adventure, and I'll use this to run this really well. Much like someone could be a great director but no good at writing a script. You can be a GM like that, where you're like, actually, I'm just going to run this pre-published adventure, and I'm going to think of some cool bits to do, and I'm going to give voices to the guys, and I'm going to do a great job of it. But I don't have the time to write, or don't have the effort to write, or maybe I'm not very good at writing, but I'm very good at running it.
I love that analogy. I think that distinction between the director and the writer is spot on. It makes a ton of sense when you say it.
Just to go back to the sandbox, Scarr, you've had the opportunity to run a fair few sandbox adventures or campaigns. How do you reflect on the role of goal setter as a GM who is picking player turds out of the sand?
Well, I find that one of the big problems that I have is often I am I am suggesting so many goals that the party can often... Well, okay, it's less that I'm specifically setting story beats that are in places. I'm just saying, hey, over there is this interesting thing, and over there is this interesting thing, and over there is that interesting thing. And the player's off, oh god, we have to do it all. Every single piece of it has to be done by us because there's no other human beings in the world. And it's just like, no, you can just do what you want. You don't have to panic. Just fist fight one god. You only need to have a fist fight with one god. You don't need to kill them all.
And how long have you been a developer for Ubisoft? It's
true, and it's cruel
you're right time. Though. It's if you want to drop a goal in front of a party, it shouldn't be in a sort of a salad of side goals. It should probably be a big old birthday cake that they should be looking at. Like, how do we consume this thing whole? Rather than kind of, picking away at a buffet of goals.
Yeah, but you, as a GM,
they'll come up with their own stuff.
As you think to yourself, well, I have to at least give two options here. Otherwise, there's no player choice. It's just the players lit a light bulb and the sandbox is over. It's just like, so you have to be aware of that soft pressure to add extra options everywhere. But often I'm finding that the players would rather... The players can either not commit to anything at all, in which case they will happily run around doing little bits here and there, but they may eventually want to say, no, we want a goal. Can we somehow find a stone of teleporting so we can quickly deal with all these side goals, because we can't just leave them be, because, this isn't reality, this is map completion. And then choose the final super goal and do that. So you have to be aware of how you're presenting things and just sort of gauge like what your players' expectations are. Like, sandboxes are sort of inherently unstable because at a certain point your party is going to choose a goal or create one whole cloth out of half-remembered factions and NPCs that you made for one session and they'd fell in love with without telling you for 3 months. So at a certain point you need...
Dysfunction is a sort of a common thread through these musings.
As I said, it's because of the question of asserting authority. If you set a goal, that goal in an RPG, that goal is sort of by default a party goal. And so if a person says my goal is important now, they're sort of saying, well, my character is getting spotlight, and there's going to have to be an exchange of table time. And some people can gel with that, and some people find it really awkward. And then if you have the GM setting a goal, that's taking some choice out. That's reducing the infinite plane of possibilities down to a couple of tracks. So you have to be upfront and honest about players and GMs have to be upfront and honest about what they're doing when they're putting goal to the game, and they have to be willing to say what they're trying to do, and don't try to be like evasive or secretive about it. No, be out and honest and saying, I'm trying to do this, and I'm trying to run this adventure, I'm trying to go through this character arc. And you're not going to help yourself by having a secret goal. Actually, that's probably the next topic. Is it ever a good idea to have your goals be secret?
Well, let's consider that one then. Hida, secret goals.
Oh, look, it's down to the player and down to what the goal is. If the secret goal is murder the other players, yeah, that's going to be an issue. If it's down to, why is somebody keeping a secret as a player? Is it because they want to surprise the other players? Is it because they want a secret so they know something the other players don't know? If you were keeping a secret because you want to have secret conversations with the GM and monopolize the GM's time with your secret scheming, that's not positive play. If you're looking to do it because you want to trick the other players or get one over on them, that's not the players, not their characters. That's not terribly positive play. If you're trying to trick their characters, you can do that, but it's a lot like microwaving fish in a workplace. There's no law against it.
You're on fire tonight.
But
there are other ways of going about that. There are other situations where that comes into play. Like if you're playing, your feudal Japanese style RPG, and you could easily have a secret goal of, I must restore my family's honor by discovering or recovering the stolen sword. And your character has very good motive to not tell the other characters because it's really, a very personal, his family thing. And if anybody else finds out, then you're just making the shame worse. Whereas, sure, there's no absolute reason for the player to keep it secret, but, and certainly there's no point in keeping it secret from the GM because otherwise nothing's going to work. But keeping it secret from the other players, it makes a decent amount of sense to me. Sure, it does mean that player and the GM are going to have to occasionally, have a few secret exchanges or whatever. But when ultimately it gets revealed to the other players, if it does, it'll be more of a reveal. And also it makes it easier for those players to stay in character. I know sometimes it can be beneficial to go, my character knows nothing about that, but this is important for his bit of the story, so I'll go along with it. There's also merit to going, well, I don't know anything about that, so I don't know why he's acting that way, so I'm going to make it difficult. I'm going to object because it doesn't make any sense, because I don't have all the information. And that can be the correct thing. The guy who's trying to do the stuff in secret has to figure out a way of getting his secret stuff done without arousing suspicions of his companions, because that's what he's doing in character.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with, I've got a really good reason for it, but I always just think that you should think twice, really hard about, okay, if I'm doing this, am I doing this for a good reason or a bad reason? And because there's a huge amount of toxic play that pops up, which is just literally someone, doing stuff that's just going to annoy everybody else. Have a double think through it. Go, okay, is this going to make the game any more fun for anyone else, or is it just fun for me? And just think about that once. And if it is good, then awesome. Go ahead with it. It sounds like an awesome plot. That's a great plot you'll talk about for years. But like I've always heard tales of people going, then this character screwed us over. And, we're off writing his bus of lies again. And you get one version of the story when that guy, the person who tricked them all, tells it, and a completely different version of events when everybody else tells it, So it's one that like comes up as sort of toxic play. But I think your one is a great example of actually doing it properly, Colin.
It does tickle me. All this reminds me of this. I think we've all sat at a table as players in that moment where all the players look around and they sort of say, look, don't tell the GM what we're going to do, because it'll just give him ideas, or them ideas. So the players, a cohort of players develop a secret plan that they then lay out piecemeal, heist like to the GM, in the hope that they'll circumvent his devious traps and obstacles and pull off the job. Of course,
as a GM, I have to say, I've loved it when that has happened. I have found it so gratifying to discover that, my players have, honestly, even just being told, we've definitely been talking about the game. We sat in the pub when you weren't there and we plotted. I'm like, yeah that's fantastic. I love it. Being told that my players are discussing and getting enjoyment out of the game outside of game hours was an ego trip for me. I love it.
And with the bonus that, as a GM, you're suddenly on the receiving end of a surprise. Yeah. I just realised I've got beer dripping off my pop mic. My pop cover, whatever it's called.
Better than off your microphone.
I think one of the things about secret goals is that people who are playing secretive characters feel they sort of have to, in order to be role-playing the character correctly, quotation marks, and yeah, there's often a lot of ideas of a sort of obligation if you're playing a character of a Skulldugger's alignment or somewhat, that they must have secret goals, otherwise you're doing it. There's no room, apparently, in people's imaginations for the guy who picks locks because he likes money.
And kind of related to that, you've got to be very careful as a GM with characters. If you're trying to deliver information to the party and you give it to the wrong person, you're like, oh no, that secret message from the big bad guy to his lieutenant, I happened to hand that straight to the priest of the god of secrets, didn't I? Oh, he's not going to tell anybody because it's against his code. You got to watch for that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it makes sense for a player to build a liking of secrecy into their character. If you're GMing that character, just stay aware of it. And
I don't think I don't think it'd be wrong to say that it's all right for your character to have the goal of secrecy, but the player to have the general goal of empower the party with the information. So
that is true. That is absolutely true. And of course, the good of the game as a whole kind of has to come first. But at the same time, you have to, if as a GM I've accepted at the beginning. I've had a chat with somebody and said, yeah, I want to, play this priest of the god of secrets and consider what that might mean. And if I've said, yeah, you can play that character in the game, then I've got to allow them, at least to an extent, to play the character they built.
GM beware. So let's perhaps wrap up.
Well, I just wanted to touch on one point that Eoin mentioned way back at the start. The idea of goals as a method of advancement or similar mechanic. Maybe it's not so much as you get XP for choosing goals, but say maybe you get a Benny or something similar.
I've played games where the only method of advancement was goals.
You had to achieve milestones to rank up or to get...
Yeah, well, for example, like Soulbound, which has just come out from Cubicle 7, there are short-term and long-term goals. And the short-term goals are stuff like, you pick a short-term goal, you should be able to complete it in a session or 1 to 3 sessions. And when you do that, you get an XP. Long-term goals are you basically character-defining big moments, and you get a 10 XP, which is a huge amount of XP. So you're meant where how many of those should you get? And they're like, depends on you, but you should probably get a few of those done in your adventuring career, depending how long your career is, but not too many. Whereas short term, you should be completing once or twice a session, and they're between one every 1 to 3 sessions, and the party should have short term and long term goals as well as a group. And it can be very difficult for players to figure out appropriate short term goals. I had a player at one point go, my goal is to get paid for a job, because they just gotten paid for 2 different jobs and he's kind of a mercenary. So he's like, my goal is to get paid for a next job. The next 4 jobs did not pay out for them. They just all went wrong because they were tricks or deceit or plot hooks. And he was like, I'm going to kill someone unless I get paid for a job at some point. So it's an interesting one where they're kind of, that was basically, he got paid for that one then. But it's kind of like, it's good in one way because it gives you a little bit of goal, a little bit of drive to, I really want to get this done this session, which is actually a really handy thing sometimes in an RPG, which is a little more sandboxy. That's your goal this session. Do that, you get an XP. And that's the only way you're getting XP. So a player will then go, right, well, now I'm doing that because I want my XP, because I want to buy my new skill or I want to buy my new talent or whatever. So it can be a very useful thing for formalizing something to the GM. Hey, I want to do X this session. Now, we had a long discussion about this because it was meant to be set at the start of a session. And as the GM, I would like to know what we're doing that session before the start of the session. With a bit of luck, a bit before. But for the player, it was better when they sat down to go, right, what am I doing this session? That's what I'm doing this session. GM, this is what I'm ordering up today. And as a GM, you can be like, right, I'll do a different map up. I'll get some different minis going. It's all good. So, can be tricky.
I find these kinds of mechanics interesting, but I'm not sure I would like to have them as the sole method of getting XP. I feel like you should really have it as an option to get XP, and I think you should definitely have a mechanic for if you've chosen a goal that's a lemon, through no fault of your own, that you should be able to swap it out for something.
We're at talk to your GM territory there, and it really does depend on what the system is created to achieve. So I'm kind of happy with it. If it's the way that the creator intended the game advances, then sure, why not? Let's wrap up now with a question. So you've got your goal as a player or a character, and you've communicated this effectively to your GM. But what can we do as good allies to help our fellow players achieve their character goals, say? When and how can we step in to give a boost to our fellow players and help them along the way? Because, as we all know, it's only tycoon billionaire businessmen who have achieved everything with no help from anyone else. The rest of us often need a hand up from the people around us. And who better to support you than your party? So, Mr. E?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's always good to get that bit of help, and I think it's one of those areas. Now, I'm probably contradicting stuff I said earlier, but it's one of those times where
welcome to the party.
we're being flexible, and I don't necessarily want to use the word compromise, but I'm going to use it. But compromising your character's character for the sake of giving somebody else their time. If Mick's character has been hunting for revenge against the six-fingered man, and my character has just beaten that guy into unconsciousness with a hammer, I might have perfect reason to just kill the dude right now. He's at my mercy. But that is an opportunity for me to go, yes, I have plenty of reason to kill this guy, but he has got a life of revenge that has, been solely focused on this individual.
Oh, jump on the table back and call for a need or greed roll.
That is an opportunity for me to go, his motive is stronger here. This is his chance to resolve a thing. Sure, my character has motive, and in the heat of the moment in a real life, then it would be completely different. But that's not what we're actually doing. It's a game. Be ready to be conscious of what other players' goals might be. Be ready to make that little difference, to step away when needed. Let the spotlight fall on the other player.
That's an excellent idea, an excellent example. I'm pretty sure I've benefited from that kind of generosity in the past.
I would also say, don't be afraid to normalize being explicit with your goals. Like we've talked about secret goals earlier, and in some cases that is going to be appropriate. But in most cases, if you're running a goal-based game, you should be willing to be open about your goals. Talk about them out of character, talk about them in character, and, discuss them obliquely, discuss them explicitly, whatever it takes you, but just try to make sure you're in the right mindset so that when someone sees the secret clue to, the lost sword of whatever, that they know, oh, that's Mary's thing. I should try to tell her that next scene, or between sessions or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Hida, any thoughts?
Yeah. Have a think about them. Pick something actionable and achievable. Do not pick super abstract goals, unless that's really your thing. But certainly when you're starting out, pick something actionable and achievable for your character. I want to do X, be explicit. It sets ideas for your GM to feed to you. It's basically a way to go, this is what my character would like to do. Okay, what's my character's motivation here? Well, he wants to do this. Let's think about it like that. If I want to do that, what would I do? I do this next, And it's a way to give your... Sometimes you feel a bit lost in a game. You're like, man, I really feel like I'm just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for combat to start. Maybe what I should do is go, right, I want this bad guy's been annoying me. I'm going to go and kill his 3 henchmen that he keeps using to mess with us. Because I'm fed up with those guys being clubs against us. GM, I'm killing these 3 guys now. What do I need to do that? And you can spin off a bit of plot. That way you can make yourself feel like you're acting in the situation rather than reacting, which can be very empowering. Yeah. So set goals for yourself, set explicit, actionable goals,
And and try to make sure that they are goals that are interactive, like interactable, that they will work with either other players or the world or both. Don't say that you're after, Johnny No Friends who's lost in the mountains and no one will care about them. If he's the one who killed your father and you hunt him down, well, that's just, I go to a valley and he's there and I stab him a bit. No, you should be setting goals for, I want to, kill the head of like a league of assassins who just survived 1,000 years and killed 1,000 kings. Or, I want to get one up on the town mayor and get myself down in the dirty gutters of small town politics. Choose a goal that is going to make you press buttons in the world and, do something that will, get the party involved. Maybe that's going to require you to ask for help, but also you can do some of it, but you can't do all of it. So yeah, just try to frame your goals in a way that could cause something to happen, as opposed to at some point a fight will show up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an overlooked aspect of playing the game and dealing with players' goals, is that your goals are generally communicated to the GM and you're hoping that they will reciprocate by giving you opportunities to fulfill them. But if you are paying attention to anything, pay attention to your fellow players' goals and find opportunities to give them a leg up, because it is a team, it is a party, isn't it? It's a group activity, and you wouldn't imagine for a moment that you could get through a dungeon on your own without the support of your fellow players. So in the grand dungeon of life, perhaps they're going to need a helping hand ever so often to get over their own personal pit traps. There is nothing wrong with being a cheerleader for the person who's sitting beside you.
Just make your goal to help other people with their goals. Yeah.
It can be, but there's nothing wrong with using an opportunity where you don't have a lot of skin in the game to elevate someone else and help them along the way. I think it's too often we are focusing on how do I prevail here, and perhaps sometimes we need to look sideways and go, what can I do to get the ramp a little bit higher for my buddy?
Even if you
are, they're going to do it for me.
Yeah. Even if you are like playing the evil vizier, power behind the throne type, if your witless pawns or get their goals and become more powerful in their way, that just helps you. So don't forget that.
Okay. Scarr, do you want to take any interjections?
No, we've triumphed over all of our objectives. Mission is fully accomplished. Hang the banner, set off the fireworks. This party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter. Or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye. Okay.
Sorry, did I come on too strong there?
Never. Stronger.
Sorry, I did.
More feeling. More hyenas.
Needed an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
A lot of people do.
All right.
I'm going to stop.